Hi, Roy here. On my channel, Roy Reads Anything, anything including Antony and Cleopatra by William Shakespeare. Because it's Shaketember, a great reading event for looking at Shakespeare texts, and there have been weekly prompts I've been following, which have been really useful. I've loved this event. I think it's been really good, probably for seasoned Shakespearos who can revisit the Shakespeare's works endlessly, but also for novices like me, where relative novices, where you kind of actually reading full plays is not something I've done before. So yeah, good times. Links in the description box, which I commend to you. So Antony and Cleopatra, Roman times, a fantastic love affair, another tragedy, because we've read Romeo and Juliet, arguably a tragedy, and also another story about political power and machinations, a bit like Richard III, which was the middle prompt. So what I was taking from this was the sort of mercurial passions of this very changeable love affair that sits at the centre of it between Antony, who's one of the rulers of Rome, and Cleopatra, who is the pharaoh of Egypt, queen of Egypt, and how that works out. So to me, I think it's Cleopatra as a character sort of sits at the centre of it and is the most compelling part of the whole thing. The way she's constructed as a sort of femme fatale, and the way her country, Egypt, is this kind of land of hedonism, contrasting with Rome. So you've got Rome as the West, rational, military, imperial expansion going on, whereas Egypt, it's sort of like one long party. And part of that's about sex, but it's also a lot about drink. I mean, it's a massive drinking play. So yeah, there's that sort of contrast is sort of drives the tale. So yes, it's a love story, but it's not just at the personal level. It's about power, political power, military power, sexual power, and a sort of power that ideas of duty and other sort of ideologies, the idea of honour, things like that, the power those things have over people's actions. Another thing I think is it's about the characters performing their identities, so how they perform themselves with all of those shifting different priorities of their own desires and feelings, but also of politics and the obligations they feel they have to others, and how those things conflict and how it all ends up. Lots of battles, lots and lots of short scenes. I mean, obviously you wouldn't have hundreds of extras on the stage waving swords about, so battles, you certainly wouldn't have ships and things, so a lot of that's happening off stage, but people like staggering onto the stage and telling you what's going on, and it builds to a spectacular climax. So yeah, I got a lot out of this. I would recommend it. I'd recommend it as something to watch, certainly, and also something to read. I particularly liked picking up some of the phrases, so language from Shakespeare that's either entered our sort of normal speech or has been used in other ways. So the phrase salad days, for instance, Cleopatra talks about my salad days when I was green in judgment, cold in blood. So using the sort of metaphor of salad, cool salad for the time when she was more innocent and making less good life choices. And not just another example, a phrase that I know as the title of a book. So Iras, one of Cleopatra's servants and confidants, towards the end, "Finish, good lady, the bright day is done, and we are for the dark." We Are for the Dark I just knew as the title of a book of ghost stories by Elizabeth Jane Howard and Robert Aikman, which is really good. So, yeah, good times with this. I mentioned in the tag video for this event the Frank Benson's Shakespeare company that was a touring company in the late 19th, early 20th century. And one thing I had read was Lady Benson's memoirs, where she recounts an incident in Liverpool where they decided it would be a good idea to make the scene involving asps, snakes, poisonous snakes. To make the asp scene more realistic, they got some harmless grass snakes from a pet shop, but the grass snakes escaped in the theatre, causing comic chaos. Just thought I'd throw that in as a...
They sold them in pet shops?
Apparently, yeah.
How weird.
Well...
Legless lizards, they're not snakes at all.
Mm.
They're legless lizards.
So the whole idea was doomed to failure then. Somebody in the audience would have shouted out that isn't a snake, if they hadn't already escaped. So, not quite old enough to have seen the Benson version of the play. We did watch a while ago an RSC production that's easy to find streaming. That was made in 2017 and stars Josette Simon, so that was good. So in a way, I've done it the ideal way, watching it first, reading, and then watching another one. So we watched the 1974 quite famous RSC production that was put onto television. It was on the ITV, which was Britain's commercial channel in the 70s, late one Sunday night, including ad breaks, and that starred Janet Sussman. And that was great as well. I mean, a complete full text version of the play, staged quite simply, but it's not just on a stage, it is a sort of television production. I mean, one thing about it, it would have been filmed so that it worked well on our simple televisions of the time. So watching it now under the sort of pitiless gaze of a much higher resolution television, you can see people's makeup. It's like they've been in an explosion in a makeup factory. They're like slathered with colours. Cleopatra looks almost green. And Patrick Stewart is in it as Eno Barbus, who's a really interesting character. So he's Antony's sort of right-hand man. He has his own kind of journey of deciding what's the best thing to do. Should he follow Antony, or not? And he acts as a kind of intermediary for us, I suppose, or sort of commenter into the story. Patrick Stewart was great, though it is weird seeing an actor really well when they're like loads younger.
And the wig they'd given him made him look like Billy Crystal.
Yes, he did look like Billy Crystal in When Harry Met Sally.
Except that the bottom half of his face had a beard and moustache. But yeah, the hairline was very Billy Crystal, which was weird.
So, apart from these minor aesthetic points...
And I was going to say, you could tell that some of the gold, like crowns and stuff, were made out of cardboard, and all the gems that they were wearing on their heavily encrusted gem suits were very, very obviously plastic.
Simpler times.
Yeah.
But yeah, do recommend that as a version to watch. Third thing I've been looking at a painting quite a lot. Now, if you want to see something that has none of those defects aesthetically, The Meeting of Antony and Cleopatra by Lawrence Alma-Tadema, that was painted in 1883, is a fantastic romantic painting. It's hyper-real, sumptuous, and you can look at it, you know, almost get as much out of that as from the text, really. It's a narrative painting. Illustrates something that is now, okay, so Shakespeare working from Plutarch. Plutarch has this description that Shakespeare took pretty much as it was and turned into poetry, and it's Enobarbus of the Billy Crystal haircut, who I just mentioned, is describing Cleopatra in her barge. So this is Enobarbus back in Rome in one of the many drinking sessions, talking to his buddies. Obviously they're expecting him to give them elevated, exciting tales of what Egypt is like, and he's delivering. Enobarbus, I will tell you, the barge she sat in like a burnished throne burned on the water. The poop was beaten gold, purple the sails, and so perfumed that the winds were lovesick with them. The oars were silver, which to the tune of flutes kept stroke, and made the water which they beat to follow faster, as amorous of their strokes. For her own person it beggared all description. She did lie in her pavilion, cloth of gold, of tissue, o'er-picturing that Venus where we see the fancy outwork of nature. On each side of her stood pretty dimpled boys like smiling cupids, with diverse coloured fans, whose winds did seem to glow the delicate cheeks which they did cool, and what they undid did. So, yes, and I think the painting, it deviates from the text slightly, because you hear in that piece goes on to talk about basically how everyone's going to the wharf to look at Cleopatra, leaving Antony, who was in the market square making pronouncements, kind of sitting there. Where's everybody gone? So now in the painting, in this sort of painting within a painting, we see Antony beholding Cleopatra. So we're looking at her from one side, he's looking at her from the other, and you get this contrast. It's light and dark. It's him and his upright men, and her supine with these servants, eyes lowered, everything for pleasure, playing flutes, etc. I love the painting, which I heard about in a video which I would recommend to you. Laura Eastlake video about Cleopatra and the Victorians. So far more enlightening than my bestial utterances. Laura's video that I will link to in the description box. So yeah, that was my week of Antony and Cleopatra. Again, I read the RSC text, but sometimes diving into the no fear version for a sort of simple, straightforward view of the text, and sort of a full, much more elegantly presented version with some really interesting additional chapters and text, including stuff about different productions there have been over the years. So yeah, that's almost all, but like Antony himself, now being beguiled by Cleopatra, I'm going to make another little video just about Cleopatra at some point, so that's coming along, because although she dies, or does she, I was going to say I particularly like another thing I like about it is how Cleopatra as a character speaks through the text to undermine and subvert the play we're watching. So she's towards the end, all is lost for her. She's submitting to Caesar, Octavius Caesar, and she's anticipating the terrible fate of being taken back to Rome and paraded in triumph through the streets as a sort of sign of Caesar's power and victory. And one thing she's anticipating could happen is basically they will not make memes about it, but they'll have comedians acting out the Antony as this sort of failed drunk, and her, and that's something she can't stomach. So the way that's put is saucy lictors will catch at us like strumpets, and scald rhymers ballad us out of tune. The quick comedians extemporally will stage us and present our Alexandrian revels. Antony shall be brought drunken forth, and I shall see some squeaking Cleopatra buoy my greatness in the posture of a whore. So, you know, we're watching it in Shakespeare's time with a boy playing Cleopatra, and she, the actual Cleopatra of the text, is depicting that as a sort of terrible travesty, leaving it kind of, you know, uncertain, I suppose. We have to decide what's our view. What's our view of Cleopatra? Is she a strong woman? Is she a figure of fun? Is she just a sort of classic stereotype of the changeable woman? Don't know. No answers from me, but she certainly has a appealing, if green, face when depicted by Janet Sussman.
Yeah, that was a bit disturbing. But yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of stuff in the text about what masculinity is and what femininity is, or what men are and what women are, and it's really kind of portrayed as Rome is male and upright and walking about and swords and all that kind of thing, but the whole of Egypt is female and decadent and has made a woman out of Antony.
But the drunkenness, it's like they import drunkenness back to Rome and having the big parties where they're drinking these bowls of wine,
big bowls of wine.
As if like that's entirely the fault of Egypt that sort of corrupted them.
That's what it is. It's saying Egypt.
So if you're going to watch it, you get yourself a great tureen full of wine and take a drink every time somebody drinks on stage, and you will be dead.
Drink responsibly.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do what he just said. It's a bad idea.
Okay, probably enough of that. So back soon with something else. Like I say, more Cleopatra to come. So.